All right, welcome back, CMask viewers. We are reunited with the squad. Timothy Gordon, Will Noland, and myself, of course, Mike Pantile. How you doing, gentlemen?
Doing really well. Good to see you guys.
As well. Excellent. So I know we've talked about this in some episodes. We've kind of touched on it, but we keep getting the question from guys: how do you live on one income? How can we, grow our business or grow in our, specific workplaces, etc. And so all three of us have single income households. We just recently transitioned to that in the last like year and a half or so. I know you guys have been single income household for a while. And Will, you made a great point in the chat. The average US household income is about $75,000 a year. So first, the question, I guess a simple question, is it possible to live on 75K a year? And how does one feasibly do this? Because it may seem obvious to us, but it's obviously not obvious to the listeners and what they need to be paying attention to. And I think the big issue here with a lot of guys is that they're simply just not paying attention. What gets measured gets managed. And a lot of these guys have kind of abdicated the role in this way where the wife manages the money, and a woman shouldn't have that kind of stress on her shoulders. She just be, learning how to steward the money or use it well as her husband brings it in. So Will, I know we've talked about how much it costs to run our households, and maybe we're, outliers. You guys have larger families, so maybe that incurs obviously larger costs. Here in Canada and the UK, it's similar in that it's insanely expensive. Not to say that it's not expensive in the US, but Tim, you've made the very prudent choice of moving down to the deep red, beautiful South, where cost of living is a little bit lower. But how do you guys feasibly make it happen on one income? Will, we'll start with you, man.
Guys wondering about whether it's possible to live on the average household income in the US. Just need to think about the fact that that's what most people are doing. So obviously it's possible to do it. What would that actually look like though? This is where the hard bit comes in. So make careful choices with how much your rent's going to cost, how much your car's going to cost. It's really about prioritizing. A lot of people don't have a plan. If you look at the average car payment, I think it's up to about $1,000 a month in the US right now. Most people can't afford anything near that if they've got their average income plus a wife and kids to pay for as well. How much do you really care about a car? Where does it stand in your priorities, your grand scheme of things? The stuff you spend money on sends a message to the people who depend on you, and also really sends a message to yourself about what you value. So go through it all, look at the expenses. For me, I'm quite happy to have older cars, right? Safe cars, but older cars, because I don't care about having a plate that's this year's plate and having a fancy car. I've got better stuff to spend my money on. You can live on the average household income just fine, supporting a wife and kids, if you make that a priority. But most people don't want to do that.
I'm gonna run it straight off the computer and figure for next week, gentlemen. Tim, what are your thoughts on this, brother?
Well, as always, I would say the same thing, and I'd just iterate a little bit. But I would even say if you can buy used cars where you have no car payment, that's what you do. Right now, I have two completely paid off cars, and if you're going to buy a new car and finance it, usually buy a car that's 3 or 4 years old. I would also say this: once you start taking the ramifications of a home economy really seriously, two cars are not necessary, contrary to whatever American president that was that made the statement, two cars in every garage, said it's supposed to represent virtue or something. It doesn't. You don't even need two cars. This is what you realize once you do the math on if you're keeping a family home, if you're running a home economy, if you're homeschooling. The most that anybody's going to need to leave during a day would be the breadwinner. And you can even make this happen with just one. But I have two completely paid off cars, and it literally adds nothing to the what we have to budget for each month, because of course one of them gets driven very little, but I'm not going to get rid of it because it's been paid off for years. Makes it very easy.
Yeah. I've got two paid off as well. I keep one extra one just in case the other one breaks down, or sometimes you have kids in different places and you might need to use two at once, but that's just a personal preference.
Yep.
Yeah, and
Me
I
too.
think, like a lot of guys, that should be, watching what they're eating and tracking other valuable and useful metrics. I think guys are just not paying attention to the leaks in their boat, so to speak. They're just paying for stuff on credit, lines of credit, credit cards, etc. And they're not actually paying attention to their expenditures and, what's actually coming in terms of income. So I guess the most prudent thing I could say, practically is, actually measure what's going out versus what's coming in. And you'll notice that there's going to be a lot of useless expenses, subscription services, eating out excessively, which is insanely expensive nowadays, and other just kind of useless things that you're purchasing on Amazon because you've kind of gotten used to these, sort of creature comforts. Pay attention to the leaks in the boat. Once you know where it's going, you can know what's coming in a lot more effectively. It doesn't even mean you need to use a spreadsheet or do anything elaborate. Paying attention, putting it on a notepad on your phone. Like I track my training with on my notepad on my phone. I don't use anything crazy. Don't let technology encumber you in this way. So just pay attention. And okay, so I think a separate conversation, we'll come back to this, practical stuff in a second. A lot of guys often ask because, let's say, I think it's a little bit easier when you're courting a woman and you're kind of setting the foundation for your future, when you're letting her know, hey, listen, I want you to stay at home, I want you to take care of the home, and I'm going to bring home the bacon, so to speak, and I just want you to run the household. Okay, cool. A lot of guys are already married who have working wives, and they've been, trad pilled, if you will, for lack of a better term, and now they want to move to a single income household. So you guys, in your experience, I know both of you do marriage coaching, so your input is going to be incredibly valuable here. Tim, what would you say to the guy that is already married, his wife works, they're kind of used to that income? How could one practically have that conversation and make that transition to a single income household?
Well, I'll skip the real essence of the conversation, which is making the moral claim. To make a moral claim upon which the argument is going to be based with the guy who has a working feminist wife. Let's just so let's skip there. Logistically, it's really not very hard because if you have kids, childcare swallows up most income, and this has been demonstrated till the cows come home. So, if 60 to 80% of the second income is entirely consumed from, depending on which city you live in, 60 to 80% from just childcare, it means that that second income is doing nothing for the household because, of course, I don't have to say it, the surrogate for the strange weirdos who's watching your kids, at least the strangers anyway, will be your wife herself, which is who's supposed to be watching the kids during the day. And so we're talking about 20 to at most 40% of the second income that needs to be replaced as disposable. That's the precise in range, on target kind of income that is highly replaceable by just beginning to crunch numbers a little bit. By the way, I mean, like always have, even when we lived in California, one of the most expensive states, and we had 6, 7 kids. We moved to Mississippi because our a lot further. You live, I just saw in an article or heard in an article, 3 times more richly in Mississippi than in London. That happened to be the target city that they compared it to. But even in California, we would, we were pretty good about most of this stuff. And we didn't really budget super hardcore. We just scaled back. And even with that, we've always been lax about eating out a lot. So it's not even a count number across the board or make sure that you're perfect across all financial monthly budget categories. You do not. You can even fudge on one area. You just have to. You have to, be careful. You're not going to take extra vacations. You're not going to have 10 TVs in the house. Uh, if you want to buy new cars, you'll only have one at the most. And you got to watch gas and things like that. But if you do so, it's just very, very easy to replace 20 to 40% of the income.
Super well said. How about you, Will?
Yeah, I think what's really going on here is priorities again. How much do you both care about making it work? And is it that the woman's self esteem comes from the income that she's generating through her employment outside the home? If so, then that's not so much a practical consideration. It's tied more to the moral point that Tim said underlies this whole discussion. Practically, once you factor in all those costs, it's not that much extra to save or either make up yourself. And if you can't show her that those numbers are going to work, then at least show her it can work so the anxiety is gone. Then it's largely a self esteem thing, often, in my opinion. The world's told her that if she doesn't have that second income coming in, then she's a failure. And that's your job as the protector and provider to help her see that no, she's cherished for other reasons than that, truly important reasons. You don't measure the worth of your wife by her income stream.
Yeah, that's well said, Will. I think the biggest issue and stumbling block here for guys is they simply don't know how to communicate that and make a woman feel safe in this regard, right? There's a lot of anxiety around money and tensions around that. So unless she's a super indoctrinated feminist that needs like her independence, I think that needs to be part of like a way longer term plan because there was likely a lot of things that went astray during the courtship process, early marriage process that led to that dynamic being put in place. So that's part of a larger conversation. And I would highly recommend that any guy that's in this position to hire either Will or Tim because it is a greater conversation. Now, one way to combat this, if let's say your wife is just maybe a bit of a normie in that she just doesn't know otherwise, and she's otherwise pretty faithful, good woman. Presenting her with the hard numbers is going to provide a significant amount of safety and ease of anxiety. And this is going to be also part of a kind of a longer term plan, maybe 4 5 6 8 months, a year. It's got to be a bit of a transition, but if you can kind of bring these details and this plan to her and also have a plan, don't just kind of have a casual side conversation about it, I think that'll kind of put her mind at ease and she'll be in a much better position to receive uh, uh, such a thing and such information. I know for my wife it was that was mainly it. It's like, hey, can we do all of this on your income? Yeah, okay, great. I've always wanted to be stay at home. you know I just decided to work because I wasn't in, necessarily in a relationship or definitely a traditional relationship, but she was raised with traditional values. And for much of you, that could be the conversation. It's simply just sitting her down and having this conversation. And my wife did go through a bit of like not an identity shift, but it's like, oh man, that's so weird. Like I'm not going back to work. I've been at this place for 15 years at a really good salary, but like I'm so ready to do it and I want to do it. So prepare yourself for that because there is going to be some kind of an identity shift, even if the woman is more trad minded, like my own wife. But bringing her the plan and letting her know exactly what I make financially, you'd be actually shocked to know how many women don't even know what their husbands make and how much they actually take home. So that's part of a greater conversation that's necessary. So for you guys, I know for me sometimes I struggle with kind of finding this balance. How do you guys, and this is I guess more specifically for like the type A go-getter dudes out there, how do you guys find the balance between ambition and being okay with where you're at and just kind of surrendering to God's providence, if you will? I've been in business since I was 22 years old, so all I've really known for the last 10 years of my life has just been doing it for myself and just go 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 all the time. And I'm grateful to say that I finally reached a point where I know exactly how much I want to make, how much I aim to make, and I don't really care to make much more than that. And praise be to God for the restraining of my appetite there. I guess the question here too, before we get to that, is should guys always be striving to make more? Should they be okay with, let's say, making the median household income and just running their family on that? What do you say, Will?
So there's no obligation to make more than is reasonably necessary. A lot of this, I think, comes from anxiety. So if you know how much running your household costs, right? What do you actually need to provide to get a reasonable standard of living for your family? What is that number? And then you've got to ask yourself, well, what sense is there in radically overshooting that number? Why would I do that? What are my values and priorities there? For some people, it's because they're terrified the income stream might dry up in the future, they might get sacked or whatever. But you can account for that just with some basic prudence by saving a little bit. And if you're earning slightly over what it actually costs to run your family, then you've got those savings. And then often this is also solicitude as well, which is like a disordered concern for your temporal affairs in the future. And Christ warns us against this, says not to be solicitous for the morrow, it will be solicitous for itself. And there's an element of trust in providence here. And sufficient to the day is the evil thereof. And you shouldn't be in the mindset of thinking you have to stack up millions for something that might happen next year or 10 years from now. Instead, largely you have to just do your work. That's necessary, but don't worry too much about it. Of course, it's prudent to save a bit and not get into massive amounts of debt. But I think there's a quote that I found earlier that I loved. St. Jerome, that's it. Work must be attended to, but worry must be banished. Write that one down. Work must be attended to, but worry must be banished. So if it's not that you're trying to earn X amount to prove to whoever that you're a real man and using salary as some kind of yardstick for yourself, the measure of your value, is it that you're worried that you might not have enough? Well, perhaps there's something there you need to look into. Maybe that's to do with your spiritual state.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think a good measuring stick for me was, how much could I realistically make that allows us to live, and to pay for our bills and invest and go on vacations every year. Like, I think it's important. Will, a conversation that we had a while ago is, you simply ask, Mike, like, what's important to you? You prioritize those things that are important, kind of discard the rest. But as soon as it starts to impede on family time and you being a present father, that's when you know you've gone too far. I've gone way too far. And I noticed a bit of anxiety that was kind of constant throughout the whole day. So I felt this pressure to maintain a certain, high amount of income. And then once I actually kind of pulled those numbers back a little bit, I was able to get a lot of my time back. So I was still working hard, but not so much that my family didn't see me. My daughters, my wife, didn't see me. And so I had to kind of overshoot the target to kind of find where that middle ground was. And, in that, and also, I mean, was a lot of spiritual, practice in complete surrenderance to God's providence. That allowed me kind of to get to this point, because a lot of times I think ambition and provision, guys will kind of cope with themselves and say, hey, listen, I'm ambitious, I want to provide for my family, when really it's just greed and avarice that is taken over. They're just not self-aware enough, especially spiritually, to understand that. So Tim, how have you found that balance yourself, brother?
By reminding myself that I'm going to die and that I'm not judged based on the amount for my. This is a really easy reminder for me, because I don't naturally get solicitudinous with money. It's more of a challenge for me, as lots of people know, to avoid solicitude with regard to like my health and my family's health. So I'm not saying I'm perfect at it, but I always just, I mean, some guys have blessings that way where they never worry about their health. Some never really worry about money. I've been, blessed in the latter way, but not the former way. I just kind of have always naturally enveloped myself in family activities, which I enjoy a lot. And so, second that I moved from being a first year attorney, where I was not well paid, because first year attorneys have not yet taken the bar. I was never planning to be a long term attorney. I just went straight back to teaching high school. I actually got a pay raise when I went back to teaching high school from being a first year attorney. So it's hard to believe as my one time boss at the law firm thought that was, that, hey, I'm leaving to go back to teaching at Garces. And he said, really? You're making that amount? Can I come too? I was like, you're making enough here. But as soon as I secured that salary, the second pass round, I just really enjoyed having the easy hours because it's a schedule high school, and now no longer drowning in bill. We were really drowning in bills the first that year that I was at the law firm, which is the opposite of what people think. I was just like, we have enough now. Didn't even do a tight budget. I just knew that bringing in 20,000, which is the raise I got, kicked my family up to we're going to be okay, and we are no longer paying bills off with credit cards. And then I just I got some little I'd say medium raises for a high school teacher over the next 3 or 4 years, and then I think I was getting even 10,000 more than that within a couple 3 years. And then I was just like, I knew we were going to be okay. I didn't even budget, enjoy doing the act, but that's just by
Can't hear
enjoying.
you. Will, can you hear him? Oh, there he is.
Yeah, I'm gonna put headphones on and see if it fixes the echo because I got echo cancellation on, but people are still saying there's a slight echo from YouTube.
Yeah, I'm hearing it with Tim speak, and I think they're hearing it when I speak as well. I think we may have to find a different platform because headphones or no headphones, it's still the latency issue is there. I can still hear you completely perfectly, though, Tim. So, I mean, there's a bit of echo. It's annoying. We'll fix it next week. Sorry, guys. Apologies for that. And sorry to disrupt your thought there, Tim, as well. Go ahead and finish it
That's
if
all
you
right.
can remember it.
Hear me now?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Mike's echo was fixed by what Will did somehow. Anyway, so yeah, enjoying my family is how I have avoided the worry about money. Doing just fun, cheap, around the house family activities. I just kind of enveloped myself in that.
Yeah, dude. But by the way, Will, as soon as you put the headphones on, Tim stopped echoing.
Right. Nice.
So maybe that's the fix.
Yeah.
Three boomers that are not boomers trying to figure it out.
Is Mike still echoing? I can't hear
So
an echo from Mike.
No,
no,
no.
no, Tim, you're not echoing anymore either. So hopefully you guys in the comments, you know, drop a comment. Maybe we've stopped echoing now. Hopefully we have.
Hope so.
Anyways, so that's all great stuff. I think kind of to pivot this a little bit more now. Let's say a guy, and I'm trying to hit this from all angles because there's so many questions and it's kind of the usual same, like 5, 6, 7. Let's say a guy's not making enough to do that right now, not enough to live on a single income. Maybe he's a young dude. Maybe he hasn't had much, ambition. Him and his wife have a child, and he's like, man, what do I do? I know my advice in the past has always been like, well, that's kind of one of your top, priorities as a man and as a father is bringing home the bacon for your family. So if you have to work multiple jobs and work long days and work weekends, then do that. Some people have kind of come down on me for that advice because you're not going to be with your family as much, but at least they have a roof over their head. And until you fix that problem and you can scale back, you've got to fix the big problem first. Will, what do you say?
Yes, some guys actually do have stay-at-home wives and a couple of kids on 50K or less, right? So if you truly think you can't do it, I would try and find someone who is doing it on an amount similar to what you're earning, because you might find there are some things that you missed. Otherwise, it might be time just to just downsize or upskill, right? Learn something else. It's just a fact that some professions are better for supporting a family than others. It's just the way it is. So you can have a look at what guys earning the amount that you need to cover your living expenses are actually earning. People talk about this like it's some big mysterious problem. What job should I do to be able to provide for my family? Well, have a look at what guys are doing who earn the amount that you want to earn. If you don't have the skills for that, go and acquire them and then do what they're doing.
Yeah, that's great. The recommendation too, if you're a young guy that's listening to this, even if you're a dude that's kind of already has a job, um, if nothing else, go get involved in a trade. All the trades pay well here in Canada. If you're an electrician or you're a plumber or you're an HVAC, it's like a one-way ticket to earning well into the six figures once you're done your school. And there's a way to do that while you're still working a job. So I would highly recommend that. If you're a dude that's particularly charismatic, you know how to speak to people, you have high social EQ, let's say, get into sales. We live in a time right now where it's never been easier to make money. And I've started multiple businesses. One was a brick and mortar, and a couple of different ones were online. And the startup to first dollar drag is a lot shorter than it has been in the past because of the internet. And so, yeah, you're competing with a lot of people. There's a lot of noise. There's a lot of space. But sorry, there's a lot of noise, but there's also a lot of space. There's always a lot of space for quality. Always. And if you come in with a message, whether it be in fitness or in what have you, whatever your interest is, you'd be shocked at how people can make money online.
Yep.
Whether it's affiliate marketing, sales, coaching, what any number of things. The problem is guys get paralysis by analysis. They want things to be perfect. It's like the guy that wants to start a podcast but wants to make sure it looks like Joe Rogan's before he even starts. It's like, dude, like, you're missing the forest for the trees. You've got to get started. You've got to start building that momentum. I think the issue is a lot of guys don't have any marketable skills. So if you don't, get involved with the trade and get some dirt under your fingernails. That's a really feasible way to do it. One thing that we did, and this was in hindsight, I thought initially was one of the worst decisions I've ever made, but it was actually one of the greatest decisions I ever made, was moving from my hometown of Vancouver to Alberta. And so Vancouver is one of the highest cost of living places in the entire world. A normal detached house is in excess of 1.5 to $2 million, which is incredibly, insanely expensive. So imagine having to carry $1 million plus mortgage, even when you're doing well. So my decision there was, okay, I want much bigger space. I want more space. I want more bedrooms. I want, a place where my children can grow up and not have to have these worries. So I moved to where my wife was raised, here in Alberta. And, we built a beautiful house that I would not have been able to get in Vancouver. And guess what, too? My earnings went up dramatically as well. Lower taxation in a more conservative place. Alberta is similar to the South in that way, in terms of, politics and taxation and whatnot. More time for family. And with all that, I've been able to, allocate mental and emotional resources to building something else that I never would have been able to do in Vancouver. A lot of people have a nostalgic attachment to where they come from, and understandably so. I miss home every single day. I'm sure, Tim, there's aspects of California that you absolutely miss. But, like, what is more important to you? Maybe I'm assuming wrong, but there's got to be something about where you come from that you miss. But you're like, man, I would never trade where I'm at for the world because I get to take care of my family. Would you say that's right?
Yeah, I mean, like, there's one or two things about California I'd have to say I miss, but mostly no. Remember, friends are the family you choose, and so a lot have everybody in the world has at least one or two issues with their family of origin. The way that the last few generations raised families, a lot of people have more than one or two issues with the way they were raised, and yet they're converts to serious Catholicism, find friends in their parish or in their community that are much, much more like their origin. Well, that's, and I always say to people, what are the odds that your family of origin is? If you're, I don't know, the little flower, then you're one of the ones. Your family of origin are the best people in the world, but it's much more likely you're going to meet the best people in your orbit if you hand pick them, and that's why friends are the family that you choose. Same thing with where people are from. Most people are not from the coolest, best place to raise a family, because the coolest, best place to raise a family, if you just say what's the coolest of the 50 states to raise a family if you're Christian, there's only a 1 in 50 chance that you happen. So look into it and move there. And what we were doing back for making 30 grand for a firm, I always knew I was probably podcast with Taylor getting to. So I plan, and the Go plan always involved. It was actually a place I was applying to school each March, April at the end of the school year, and just wasn't really getting jobs, wasn't landing enough money and offers. Find a place that's very cheap that you hate to live. Like in the U.S., it was always like West Virginia, Mississippi, a couple of, and the only one of these places that I would live in is Mississippi. So I'm actually shocked how much people don't do this. Just make one move for all time, the kind of thing you're talking about, Mike, and it makes the purchasing power, the dollars you make double in some cases. Going from California doubled the value of my dollars, and of course, since at that point I was making dollars from outside the state, it was kind of the best of worlds. I doubled up because I was bringing money that I made from the internet at that point or states. So you live like a king when you make the right move. And yeah, your point's well taken, Mike. I mean, people think California is some kind of wonderland. It's actually not. But the couple things I might actually miss about that state, uh, Catalina Island, and I don't know the things. Yeah, I can go back and visit once every 5 years if I really need to. Or much, 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 much happier and wealthier here in Mississippi.
I feel that as soon as I moved here, like how far my dollar went. Again, I think it was probably more than double, especially with regards to housing. It was a multiplier, greater than two, and just that alone, and having my kids have their individual bedrooms and being in a place where people are more normal. I would never trade that for geographic natural beauty any day of the week. Guys are afraid to do that, and also too, like, even just putting aside the finances stuff for a second, leaving and cleaving. I know, Tim, you and Steph have written that book. This is actually going to have a really good effect on your marriage as well. You're establishing your marital island. You're doing stuff together. You're working as a team. You're working as one flesh, where I think there is an over reliance on each other's families. And I guess with child rearing and childcare, at times that's important. But you'd be surprised. And part of that move for me was to really like initiate myself into manhood, because like my gym that I had started when I was 22, that I had for almost 10 years, was in the neighborhood that I grew up. Like my family was everywhere. So I was just comfortable. It was surroundings that I knew. And I hit a point where I was really stagnating. So making that move really put me in deep water, and I had to learn how to swim. And it was treacherous for a bit, but by the grace of God, if you really trust in providence and surrender in him, he's going to provide you the loaf of bread. And for me, he always has. Will, is a separate point. This is more so curiosity for myself. Do you live where you grew up?
Not far. I moved away for various things, work, study, growing up, but then we moved back relatively close just because there's elderly relatives to look after, things like that. And it's fairly expensive, but it's nowhere near the most expensive place you could live in the UK. So the point you're making about choosing your base and making sure the money's going to go reasonably far, that's one of the best ways to get it done, I think. The point about treacherous waters to begin with, I think there's something about just like courage is closer to recklessness than it is to cowardice. I look back and think about being early 20s, having 3 kids by age 23, and not having a clue about money, not having a high income, but just going for it anyway, and things turning out okay by the grace of God. If you have that kind of forward lean to you, and you're not the kind of guy who wants to crunch a spreadsheet before you decide that it's right to get married or have a family, that's okay. You'll learn some tough lessons along the way, but you shouldn't be afraid to go ahead with it. Like, you will figure it out as you go. So many people wait until the conditions, as they imagine, are just right, so they're going to feel safe. But there's all kinds of reasons why you're not going to be safe even then. So it does just require going for it.
And safety is an illusion. It's a complete illusion when it comes to especially financial security and safety. I remember when I was a young dude, and I was like, oh, as long as I have $10,000 in the bank, like, I'm going to be good. And that number multiplied by a significant amount. And no matter how much money I have in the bank, how much money I have invested, the house that I'm in, it's never enough. So unless you really work to grow in virtue and really like restrain that appetite by the grace of God, it'll never feel like enough. And that is like sort of the slippery slope of greed in general. And there's another point too, figuring it out as you go. And I think this might sound weird and maybe kind of woo-woo, but the more, because I've most of my life, being raised by blue collar Italians, and we were like, my Italian family, middle class family. there was always this sort of poor mentality around money. And so for much of my life, much of my marriage, I've been very like miserly and cheap. And it's an unattractive trait. And plus, I never needed to be, but it's a fundamentally unattractive trait. But I've the more that I now just kind of spoil my family and friends and give and kind of just like not spend recklessly, but spend a little bit more loosely, trusting in God's providence, the more money seems to find me. It's very strange. I don't, some people call it law of attraction. Obviously, don't believe in any of that stuff, but the more that I kind of have detached myself from, what my income is every month or how much I have in my bank account, and I really use it as a tool, which that's all it is. It's a tool. It's a great servant, but terrible master. The more money seems to find me. And in that as well, it's really ordered my appetite where I'm like, man, I don't need to scale my business to $100,000 a month. I know, Will, we were just talking about this, or $80,000 a month. I don't need that. Like, what do I need that for? I don't care about Lambos. I don't care about Rolexes. I don't care about having, a multi-million dollar house. I care about having, let's say a dowry for my daughters so they can purchase a home in the future, and for my future children, so they're okay. I mean, this is also scriptural as well. Is it a necessary thing to leave them an inheritance? Well, you'd rather leave them a spiritual inheritance than a financial inheritance. But in kind of doing so, I've kind of it's detached that sort of inordinate desire that I've had toward money, and that's something I really admire about the two of you guys. And guys are always asking, and this is almost an impossible question to answer because it's very contextual. But like, how does a guy make more money?
I made a list, Mike. I knew that someone would be thinking, even after I said, look at who makes the amount you want to make and go do that. They still want a list. And Tim's written a good book about this. You can get the stats on it there too. Don't go to college. And here's just 10 things you could look at that don't require college. They're all going to get you in the 75K plus range. Some will take you comfortably over 100K. You guys might have some other ones, but here's just a quick list. Electrician, construction supervisor or foreman, HVAC technician, commercial pilot or aircraft dispatcher, elevator installer and repairer, so lucrative, web developer or programmer, self-taught, go to a coding boot camp, IT support specialist or network technician. If you're a guy who can fix that stuff quickly, people pay. Owning a small business, like a landscaping business, cleaning services. You can make a lot of money doing that. Real estate agent. Or you could go for just being a firefighter or a police officer. None of those require getting into college debt. They're all going to get you comfortably above what you need to support a family on one income. If you don't have those skills, you can go and start getting the experience for them today.
I mean, it's really as simple as that, right? I mean, it's with so many things like, what's your prayer life, or what do you do for your fitness, Mike? It's like guys are looking for a sexy catch-all answer. Like, this is what you're going to do. It's going to secure you six figures. Everything's going to be peachy keen. It's like, listen, it's not. It's the work that you're avoiding doing, or the type of work that you're avoiding doing, is the reason that you're in this position to begin with. And like, I can understand that, yeah, the economy is really tough. Like, especially, certain places, in the US and Canada and UK, it's terrible. But I know, hey, listen, work's got to be done. If I have to pivot, I'm going to pivot. God's going to guide me. But if you can't take one off that list, you're bullshitting yourself, essentially. What do you say to that?
Specifically to what, Mike?
To that, if you can't take one or two off of that list of those careers, and the guy's like, oh, I don't know how to make more money. I'm, working at Starbucks or whatever, and I'm making 40K a year. Like, what do I do?
Yeah, exactly. That list is attainable. You don't need college for it. And if people look at it and they're like, that seems like a really, really, really big change of life. Some people like change, I don't. I would rather if I were a guy that's claiming, it's a big part of it is what the guys are claiming, that they can't live on their current income. A lot of times that's not true. They just need to make budgetary cuts, then go do those jobs. That's why me and CMASC, honorary founder Michael Robillard put that list together. If you really are just like a barista and you're making $10 an hour, then that's not going to cut it. But if you have a decent salaried job and maybe you're just making 50K and you're not going to get to 70K for 10 years, and you're like, well, I don't know, I could probably stay here and make cuts, then make cuts. But yeah, you ought to be able to find one or two of those jobs that's less boring than the others. And this is why we told young men, you don't need to go to college. If you're not interested in philosophy, mathematics. Remember, these are the three disciplines for which the university by the Roman Catholic Church. It's not supposed to be trade school. What's actually better at getting you a trade is going through apprenticeship, which most of those professions involve. So take it seriously, and yeah, you ought to be able to pick one or two of them. But I'm always the guy that brings it back to, you ought to be able to, if you have a half decent job, you ought to be able to and not have to make a profession or even a geographical change. But if you do all three, to this cheap place, I'm going to cut out frills. I'm going to become electrician place. Then you're going to be living like a king, and you didn't need college to do it, and you don't need that sex. You don't need to pimp out your wife to do.
That's well said, Tim. And guys will often overlook the intangibles that are developed when you can actually you learn a trade or start a business. Like the things that I've learned from starting a gym has applied to any of the businesses that I've ever started. And I was having a conversation with my wife. I'm like, if like the grid shut down and I didn't have access to the internet, which is how I make my money, I would just go start something else, because the same skills, maybe a slight pivot in like the literal skills that produce the money, but how to get income to start coming in is the same thing. I would go and knock on doors, see if people needed landscaping services or driveway cleaning. I'd do the first like 10, 15, 20 for free, tell them to tell a friend, do a really good job, and go, really far away in providing quality work. And I would just mail out flyers or go door to door and put cards in people's mailboxes, and money's going to start coming in. Like, go and look at any suburb or any, wherever you live. There are millions and millions of dollars around you at all times. You just got to
Yeah.
learn how to facilitate an exchange of those resources. So a skill or a trade or something that you have, it's really not rocket science. It's just like that painful, bloodying of the knuckles that a lot of guys don't want to do in order to get there. And the money is not going to solve your problem. It just solves the problem of not having money, which happens to be a big problem. But past a certain point, quality of life is going to be the exact same. And so odds are, if you're a guy that can't run his household on 40 or 50K, a big change needs to happen. And it either has to be some kind of career change where you got to get in trade school or something, or a geographic change, or both. So I think what you said there, Tim, is fantastic. So we got a question from Tommy. What do you guys think about the work from home / man going to a job outside the house? Thanks, guys. Really great conversation. So if you could clarify, I don't know, you guys go ahead, Will.
Either's fine, whatever suits your skill set and your location. Your primary duty is to your family. So if you can provide for them more efficiently by working from home, then go for it. But if there's some great job in your local area, great benefits, all the rest of it, and it suits your skill set better, then work outside the home. This doesn't need to be a rule. It's not a cookie cutter thing that real men never work from home or whatever you might think. It depends on the guy and also his situation and maybe different times of life as well. You might have different priorities. So this is just a prudential decision. I feel a lot of the times people are looking for rules that stop them having to think, but actually that's not the case. If you are desiring not to think, that in itself isn't masculine. You have to have your wits about you and to be adjusting on the fly as things change.
What do you say, Tim?
Yeah, good answer. I mean, I don't have a lot to add. Obviously, you can't absolutize a relative rule, and most of this stuff is prudential. Guys will ask me, like you said earlier, Mike, how much do you pray a day? It's like, look, that's up to you. Don't violate any of the black letter law, and there's black letter law if you're a Catholic against voluntarily having your wife go out and leave the house and work. There's not as strict rules on how the breadwinners to win bread. So follow the rules Will laid out. By the way, if you're looking for like one-on-one man coaching, that's all Will. You know, Mike, you said Steph and I do this earlier. That's two half the time. We always insist that the wife is there because she's the one holding things up, and so it's a totally different thing. If you're looking at kind of one-on-one coach, it's all Will Nolan.
And I think Mike does that if you're more focused on fitness, right, Mike?
Yeah, I made the pivot recently where it's mainly guys that are wanting to improve their fitness, lose weight, build muscle, and also huge demographic of guys coming to me for, you know, overcoming pornography as well. But I do a lot of stuff, man. People come to me for business and for this type of thing. But if it's marriage related, you know, then Will's your guy. Tim and Steph are your peeps. Reach out to them for sure. Yeah, as far as working from home, yeah, it was a weird adjustment for me being at home for sure. I make way more money now being at home than I ever did at my gym, and I much prefer to be around my family all the time. The biggest thing that I had to do was separate literally by a floor where I go work versus where I'm when I'm with my family, because I got young children and they're constantly making noise all the time. You can probably hear in the background. So that was pretty much the only adjustment I had to make. And on top of, if you're already kind of disciplined, you're going to be able to keep a schedule. I could see it really slipping to the wayside if you don't know how to keep a schedule and you're just kind of floundering all day and you're not doing anything. But I've got a set of, you know, tasks I have to accomplish every day, and I get those tasks done. And I'm not working all day. I maybe work a handful of hours every day. You know, work is kind of always kind of on the mind, but I'm not working like 12, 13, 14-hour days. When I'm not doing my calls or producing content or doing podcasts, etc., I'm with my family. And so as long as there's a separation of my like actual literal workplace and where my family is, I think that's the only consideration to make. Unless nobody else has any questions, you guys have any final thoughts on this topic? I feel like almost in a way, there's only so much you can talk about this stuff, right? Because at the end of the day, it's go and do it, guys. Like, we could write a whole book on this stuff, but it's really not that complicated. What are your closing thoughts on that, Will?
Yeah, we given you a good list of professions you can get into to hit the amount that you need to support a family on one income. They don't require a college degree. You can make 20 calls today. You can send out 20 emails. You can go and knock on 20 doors to try and pick the one that you think is the best fit for you and get a foot in that door. So make it happen if it's truly a priority. If it's not a priority, think about why that is. What are you preferring instead? And that's your problem. Whatever that thing is you're more attached to, that's your real problem.
What about you, Tim?
Similarly, I can make people a list of states to move to if you're willing to really push your purchasing power, your dollars. You know, where I came, Mississippi, Alabama, West Virginia, Wyoming, Montana. These are places you can go and double the purchasing power of your dollars. And similarly, we could make a list of really budgetary cuts that you can make, not just not eating out, but you know what car paying, things like that. And we've done that on this episode and others. And most of the time, the guys that are like, "Oh, there's nothing I can do, I'm stuck," you ask them, "Okay, what should like, but hey, I've tried nothing, a lot of ideas." So we're providing plenty of ideas, but like you guys say, it's an action theory, like Aristotelianism.
Yeah, so I think the biggest takeaways here, guys, is pay attention to your outflow versus your inflow. Understand where your money's going and how much is coming in. You may need to make a geographic change, move somewhere cheaper, and you may need a career pivot out of that great list that Will just provided. Like, it's pretty simple. The rest is filled in with faith in God that He's going to provide and hard ass work. I mean, it's like fitness too, right? Like, you could talk about this for hours, but it really comes down to like 3 or 4 main points. You just got to hit those consistently. So, guys, I wish I can give you a magic pill, but we can't. But until next time, guys, God bless you. And I appreciate everybody that tuned in live, especially with our technical difficulties. Looks like we got that sorted finally. God bless you, dudes.
You too, guys. See you next time.
See ya.